My name is Juanita Lanzon. I'm the curator of the exhibition Changing Landscapes, and I am a curator within Foco, which is an organization that nurtures and promotes the work of fine art photographers, fine art and documentary photographers. Since 1974 through the Nueva Luz publication, the fellowship, and other exhibitions like, for instance, the Apartment Gallery series and other opportunities for artists. We work mostly with photographers of color. I have worked before with Bill and Kimberly at other capacities when I was a curator at Longwood, and I still continue to work with them because I see the value in the promotion of the artists and also making sure that work reaches out to a larger, broader audience. This exhibition, Changing Landscapes, zooms into what we have noticed, that you came with an idea of what were landscapes that are changing, and that these landscapes are not necessarily, I'll say, that much literal. They're also metaphysical. The landscapes involve the buildings, the communities, the places, but also the people that live and inhabit these landscapes. I have Anders Jones, which is a multidisciplinary artist that will work sculpture and textile design. I also want to introduce you to the work of Adela Hurtado. Her series of photographs are called The Colours of Trujillo, and they document facades and all buildings in the town of Trujillo, Peru, where her parents are from. Adela is a photographer, and she's also an animator. I'm also going to be working or speaking tonight with Ignacio Soltero, which is a photographer based in the Bronx and DJ, and he's been covering outdoor musical events. And I also have Cindy Trinh, which is a photographer and civil rights activist. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to start with Adela. Adela, if you can talk a little bit about your work and the series of The Colours of Trujillo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adela Hurtado, and the Colours of Trujillo is basically my latest photography project, and it's a tribute to the city of Trujillo, Peru, which is my family's hometown in Peru, and to its colonial buildings and its deteriorating structures, like the buildings or its streets as well. And, it started as a personal project where I was just wandering through the streets with my father, taking photos and all that, but then listening to him talk about who lived there, what the buildings used to be. And then it turned into something more public, because I started noticing that every time I went back to Trujillo, a building would disappear or would get worse than before. And all of these are really historical buildings that have been there for hundreds of years and have made up the colors of Trujillo. And so with this project, I don't want my photos to be the only evidence that these buildings existed or that Trujillo looked like this at some point. So I hope that for many years to come, that these buildings will still make up the colors of Trujillo. And that's my project right now.
So I will then now go to Ignacio Soltero. Ignacio, tell us a little bit about you and your project.
I guess as far as the work I submitted was about my exploration of aerial photography, and also doing something I normally never cover in my photography work is basically landscape. So the stuff that I have submitted were most stuff I normally would shoot would be within music events, whether if it's like action sports like mountain bikes and BMX, and besides musical events like it's usually events that I'm going to, that I just go and just randomly bring my camera. And with my exploration with the changing landscape, and the idea of that with my photography and aerial photography was basically exploring a whole new world, which is for me using drones and just trying to take some interesting angles using that. So focusing on almost two areas that are outside of New York City, because it's very hard to shoot drone photography within New York City because of just the proximity of buildings and all the FAA laws. So I went to two different areas of New York, one being Governor's Island and the other one being in Nyack. These are photos I took a couple of years ago, so some of them are dated. I probably have some more updated ones that are probably slightly better, but I still thought they were interesting enough to submit.
Cindy, you're next.
Hi, my name is Cindy Trinh. I'm a photographer and visual journalist and civil rights activist. I'm presenting my series called No Boundaries. And I started this series about 5 years ago. I started taking pictures in Chinatown. And for me, living in New York the past 12 years, Chinatown has really become a home for me because I grew up in California with a predominantly Asian American community. So when I moved to New York, I felt like Chinatown was the only neighborhood in New York that I could really relate to and find, comfort in the food and the culture and my friends that all gather in Chinatown and we all go out to eat and we all spend a lot of time there. So I started thinking about the workers that make Chinatown Chinatown. And I started documenting a lot of workers in the neighborhood because I wanted to really highlight their everyday lives. And I would hear a lot of comments like, racism and discrimination doesn't happen to Asian Americans in this country. And that's because of the model minority myth that Asians are successful and wealthy and that they are, that they're well educated and they have money. But that's not true for a lot of Asian Americans, especially here in New York, where there's a huge number of Asians living in poverty. And so I wanted to combat that myth that all Asians are wealthy and successful and educated and passive. There's a lot of Asian Americans that work really tough jobs, that are struggling to make ends meet, who are often ignored by government programs because of the myth that a lot of the government officials don't believe that Asian Americans need assistance when a lot do. So my goal is to really document like the neighborhood and the lives of these people with a focus on workers, street vendors and restaurant workers, delivery men, anything. And throughout the years, whenever I traveled, I would always go to that city's Chinatown. Like if I were to travel across the country or if I were to travel across the world, I would be drawn to that city's Chinatown. And so I found myself always wanting to take pictures of Chinatown wherever I went. And I sort of revamped my series and thought about how these people, these immigrants, they have no boundaries to where they can resettle and make a new life for themselves. They were able to leave their home country, find a new place to live, and find a new life in that new country. And that requires an amount of courage and bravery that I think a lot of people underestimate. And so my series is really about highlighting immigration in general and the tenacity of people to make a new life in a foreign country from their own. And I'm a very much a street photographer. So a lot of my photos in my series are very much in the streets. I like, Chinatown is so robust and it's so vibrant, and the streets are always just very packed and busy. Not right now, but before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, I mean, Chinatown is always just full of life and was so vibrant. And I really wanted to capture that. So in my series, I really highlight color. Color is very, very important and is a big focus. I really pop colors, and I really try to use colors to convey feelings and emotions of just like the vibrancy of being in Chinatown, that feeling of when you're walking around and you're smelling all the smells and you're taking in all the different red and yellow. Like Chinatown is very heavily red in color. So I really wanted to highlight colors in my series and just really showcase people in their element, in their everyday lives.
Thank you so much. That was great. Your works are very different, all of you, but also there's all these threads that connect them. Ignacio, it's interesting that although you have captured mostly people, action, outdoor activity, music, summer, the energy of the city, so the landscapes are more about the people that inhabit them. You kind of went in a very different direction, if that word is not redundant, and you basically cover landscapes. But although at first I remember that I was seeing them, but I didn't read the caption on purpose because I'm like, I wonder if I can tell where this is. And there were times that only once I was able to out of the 6 photographs that I saw. But it's interesting because not only these are landscapes of places where people congregate, and I know that due to technical reasons and the regulations of, I think it's aviation administration, and where you can fly drones, you were able to fly these or capture these photographs in Nyack, at a park in Nyack. I think it's a memorial park, and forgive me for not having the title correct, on Governor's Island. So what made you decide to photograph these places? And I noticed if you pay close attention and you zoom in, there is people there, but you can hardly see them, and they become these abstractions of concrete and grass. So tell us more about that and the process.
Yeah, it's very different from what I normally would shoot, since generally, like, my work is about documenting wherever I'm at. Since I'm just a shy person by nature, and being a photographer, I always want to be behind a camera and not in front of it. So I guess with the areas that and the way I shot them were, I guess I was just, it's about, I guess, just looking for shapes and seeing how light contrast objects and finding something interesting. Like I'll say with Governor's Island, it's very easy to do some of the typical shots that some of my other friends that I was with that are photographing the area, which would be like the Statue of Liberty, for example. They doing the skyline of New York. And so it's like, I wanted to do something, capture the place where I was at, but also like there was a lot of interesting shapes when I started to, instead of focusing straight out, as most people would normally do, I decided to, let me just start shooting straight down and see what that brings, like what's there. Because it's a perspective that we normally don't see, we live on the ground, unless you happen to be in a plane, possibly in a helicopter, or maybe in a very tall building, you're not going to see the world from above. And even then, you don't see it from a perspective of straight down, which most of the photos were. So I know there's a few that are from an angle, but most of it just from a perspective straight down. I was trying to show what was there. So like I just found some interesting shapes. And then when it came to Nyack, it was a memorial park. It was the same thing. It was just finding something a little bit different, finding something that was interesting, and comparing, contrasting objects that were on the ground to each other, and just taking it from there, and just like I said, just learning. It's really just about learning what I can do with the camera, because that's the way I look at the drone. For me, it's just a flying camera.
It was really unusual for me to see this work of yours, because your work is so much like on the ground with and around people, right? Like if there's a park, like this series of like hip hop musicians, or like this, when the parks open in the summer and they have these hip hop gatherings, right? You're so much like I feel I know where in the room, or if it's the park that it's near me. Some of these places I don't know, but then I'm thinking, oh wow, this is in this park in the city. This is so different because it's from above the ground, and it's almost like you're playing with abstractions and with the form. How did you get involved in taking these photographs? Was this part of a group, or how did this happen?
It was something I've always been interested in. I've always been, I guess I've always been a hobbyist of some sort. I always had hobbies. I've been into RC cars since I was a kid. One of the things that always interested me, being into radio control cars, was getting there are planes, there's RC planes and there's RC helicopters. And the only difference was I couldn't afford those objects. comparison to the car, and plus also just the limited, being that I lived in the inner city, there's limited spaces for you to fly that stuff. And for me trying to be a responsible person to a degree, and I overthink things, so I looked and say, okay, I can't fly a plane here because I have nowhere to fly it. Same thing with the helicopter. And then I also realized there's a lot of things to learn when it comes to, flying within a 3D space. With a car, it's just, you're just driving on the ground, forward, left, right, possibly backwards, but that's it. But you can almost do that anywhere. And it's also a lot more cheaper. But the thing is, like back then, where we're talking over 30 years ago, is that those devices we didn't have the ability to attach cameras to them as we do now. And with the fact that drones have become a lot more inexpensive over the years. When I got mine, even before I got mine, it took me like 3 to 4 years before I decided to buy something because there was just so much going on with it. It was an easy like $2,000 investment for something that may or may not work because all the parts were separate. The cameras are separate from the drones. They didn't have GPS lock the way they do now, and even a few years ago with the drone that I have, like mine has full autonomy, I guess, is a way of putting it. Like it's like almost anybody can fly it within 5 to 10 minutes of learning some basic rules and practice, versus versus drones of the past or even planes or helicopters where it may take many hours of learning how to fly them to get something decent. And it was affordable. That was the other thing too. I had the option to buy something at a relatively inexpensive price and still able to shoot, what is it? I think it's 12 megapixel pictures and HD and 4K video for about $1,200. And now you can get the same thing for even cheaper, for a few $100s cheaper. But yeah, I mean, I got more so into it because I did find a group online that did fly within New York City, and they kind of empowered me to be like, okay, now I know I can fly, because I was looking at FAA regulations and they have certain rules, but it turns out that it's really within the realms of New York City is that, well, actually in general, is the first rule is that you can't fly within 5 miles of an airport.
So were other people taking similar photographs in your group? Were you the only person taking these landscape photographs?
I'm sure they were taking landscape, because technically, like with drones, that's what you're doing 99% of the time. Okay. As far as perspective is concerned, yeah, I don't think they were. Okay. Like I said, most of them were focused on taking, see what they could find out in the distance. Like I said, with Governor's Island, like I know most of the guys there were all gunning for the either for the Statue of Liberty or whatever cruise ships are going by. Okay, that's like the main draw for them. Like they just want to capture. They want to capture these big landmarks, or they want to capture the cruise ships. And then when we went up to Nyack, it was very similar as far as like we wasn't too far from the I think it's the Pulaski Bridge or the new Mario Cuomo Bridge. Okay. So it was the same thing. They were shooting for that. They were so they would find areas that would they're outside of a certain area, and then they would fly in. Trying to go around the loopholes of where you can and cannot fly, though I don't totally agree with that. But yeah, so it's like I think it's just a different perspective, and I'm also coming from the aspect of a photographer. Most of them are just new to like flying drones and new to even they're not thinking of it as from a photography or video standpoint. They're taking video and they're taking photos, but that's about it. And I think there's a distinction between a person who takes photos versus, I guess, someone who's a photographer.
That makes me circle back to then with Adela, for instance, which I remember when we spoke over the phone about the photographs. It was interesting that I again, when I look at all the work, I scan it and I'm thinking, wow, landscape, facade. And one of the things that capture my attention about your work, Adela, the Colours of Trujillo, the series, was the beauty of the buildings. I was trying to guess how old some of these structures may be. They also have some of these, I also noticed the texture caused by the decay, the passing of time, but also some of the graffiti, some of these kind of like modern intervention there, the graffiti, the motorcycle. So it's like looking at the past, but also seeing that in the present. And so please tell me more about the series. Both your parents are from the city of Trujillo in Peru, correct?
Correct.
So I know that you used to go to Trujillo every year to visit family there. And so did you notice those buildings the first time you visited them, or is something that as you grew older and you spend more time moving or shifting between the United States and Peru, in particular Miami and Peru, you felt more they were part of your identity and you wanted to kind of, you wanted to preserve them? Were you interested in their architecture, the colonial connection of, the colonial history that we have in the Americas? So tell me more about that, please.
So yes, I went to Trujillo every year as a child growing up. My parents would take me every summer, and it was sort of like I had no choice. It was just like, I'm sure a lot of immigrants face the same thing. And at first it was something I would just go for fun, and it would just be like hanging out with my cousins or just hanging out in the house kind of thing, playing video games. It wasn't like I was there to do a lot of cultural things, but it was sort of like I kind of took it for granted, I would say. I was always around the main square, just sliding down like columns, like colonial columns. Like I was like all over these things, but I don't think I took notice of them as much. And as I grew older, I would say that kind of went away. I would say I started appreciating things as I got older. And I don't know if it's because I just matured or if it was just, appreciating kind of time going by. I graduated high school, graduating college, but by the time law school came around, I just stopped going to Trujillo as much or at all. I returned in 2018, and that's when the Colours of Trujillo started. But before that, I hadn't gone in 7 years. And it was kind of crazy because when I went even in 2011 and 2013, or even earlier, I noticed I had a ton of photos of me and my dad or my mom. I would take photos of the cathedrals, the buildings, and things like that. But they were just really like kind of amateur, kind of taking a lot of pictures. But my dad is a photographer from Peru as well. And so I think I just kind of had a natural inclination. He did film photography. And so I just took a lot of photos, but it was only in 2018, I would say, when I went back, I was like, wow, like, look at all this stuff. I appreciated all my dad's stories. Finally, it was like all the things that I felt like I was forced to listen to back in the day, all those old like videos he would show me of Trujillan things, culture. I was like, oh, I was starting to finally get it, I would say. And I don't know if I felt like on that point, it was like a very kind of emotional thing. I was like, oh, I'm understanding like everything now. And both of my parents were born there and my grandparents were born there. So it's like, we're really Trujillan, and that's pretty rare in Peru, especially when you ask someone from Peru, they're usually from Lima, and it's hard to find people from Trujillo, even though it's a big city. So it has become part of my identity just to kind of meet more people from there, spread these photos around about the city. And I think they're kind of emblematic of what's happening in Peru right now. A lot of old things clashing or going together with modern things. And so, yes, I think ever since I've come back, I've done even more like tourist things. I try to appreciate all of Trujillan culture even more now. Even though I used to do these things when I was a child, now it has a whole new perspective of me actually doing them like as an adult and appreciating them all fully. So
you're returning there to present like a lecture with the students there at the school. Mm-hmm. And I believe maybe, did you mention to me that one of these buildings collapsed maybe because it was an earthquake or it had some damage in the structure? Is that correct?
Right. I think a lot of them have sustained damage over the last few years, but one of them that is being presented in the gallery, I think it's called 783 San Martin. That one with the motorcycle in front of it, that one's completely gone because it has been under litigation. There's a family fighting over it, and it's been such a long time that the family has fought over it that the building just collapsed on itself, and it withstood earthquakes, like multiple earthquakes, but I think it was really the one that happened last year in Trujillo that I don't think I was there for, but I was there. I think that last earthquake was actually, it was on the news, that building, that it actually like kind of started going down into the ground almost. And I think that just kind of shook up the whole foundation, and now it's gone. And it's a shame because it was a beautiful building that was there for a really long time. And I think it's kind of a mixture of the natural elements and also people kind of neglecting to take care of that kind of history because it was just sitting there completely empty for so long. And yes, I went to Trujillo this year and I presented to their leading photography school, Foco. They invited me to speak because I was like from the United States, but also with this background in Trujillo, and it was really exciting. They showed me all of their teenage students and younger students as well. There were children there, and they had me present my photos from here, China, and other countries. But when they saw these photos, they were really, the children and the teens were really like, I don't know how to go. I want to say it in Spanish, but they were like really impressed. Like, I don't know. They were really impressed because they had seen these buildings so often. They were like, oh, that's the theater that's not used, but it's still there, you know, and that's the building, the plaza that we passed by, and all of these buildings were so familiar, but they hadn't really taken notice of them. And I think that was also my situation. The professors told me that, you know, these photos are really important for future generations because these buildings might not be here. Right. These buildings might not be here for very long. We don't know. So it's sort of like preserving history in that sense.
How did you end up being invited there to Trujillo?
Yeah, I already had a trip planned going. I go every year now because I want to do photography, visit the family, whatever, and all that. But this started because I researched. I think it was just more being proactive. I researched online, like photography schools, film schools. I ended up taking a film course at Trujillo's first film school. And I looked up photography there, like what the scene is. I want to help out. I want to, you know, get involved in photography in Trujillo and in Peru in general. So I found them and I went to visit them with my parents, and I just kind of came, and they were open all day, and I took my book with them, which is right here. It's called Colours of Trujillo. It's self-published right now, and I basically I brought this to them, and they looked through. The director of the school looked through it with me, and it just has a bunch of the photos, as you can see, through it like in one sitting. And he said, you know, we would love to have you exhibit here, be part of our festival, and do all this stuff that was supposed to happen in June. Unfortunately, because of coronavirus, that's not happening. But he invited me to speak to all of his students that were and he invited me to photography trips with them as well. And so that's how it happened. He invited me, and they set it all up. They shared my information, my email with them, and it was a really, really organized time. And I'm still in contact with them now. I've told them about Foco and this exhibition, and they said that they will also share. Yeah, I said they told me they will also share the Foco exhibition among Peruvian photographers as well. And just so yeah, that's how I was able to make the connection. I just brought my self-published book as sort of like a portfolio, and that's how it started.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Cindy, you're next, and it's interesting. I had the blessing or the fortune of visit other Chinatowns. I didn't grow up here in the States, so I always thought it was really fascinating to be able to see them because I grew up in a small town, so I only have access to very limited things. So when I first came here to Chinatown, I was blown away by I think it's something that I never experienced before. And I was thinking, wow, if I ever go to China, which I would love to, I would like to experience this. And maybe this is a mini version of something that is much larger, right? And one of the things that I think when I was talking to you was we were talking about politics and immigration, but also how these towns are enclaves for community building, for solidarity, for, Chinese in particular face a lot of discrimination. And there was this Chinese Prohibition Act, I believe it was called, where they were banned from entering the States. And when those laws were about to expire, they continued to be renewed, I believe, until the 1920s. And unfortunately, the United States, as welcoming as it is for many immigrants from Europe and or all over the place, they had these restrictions for immigrants that were coming from Asia and Eastern Europe. But for a long time, Asia, and recently we know that with Muslim communities, this is there was a traveling ban. If you can, please speak about your work and how you see that these Chinatowns through the world, but in particular here in the US, have been also places where many of these communities can find solace. They can help each other. They can fight discrimination. And like you said, they fight these stereotypical views about race and about every day and what people are like. So if you can, please talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, like you mentioned a little bit of the history. So in the 1880s, Chinese immigrants started coming to America because of the gold rush. And so they initially were settling in California, what is now California. And they were also hired to build the railroads here in America. So they were cheap labor. And they were hired to build railroads and look for gold. And more started coming, and white America started getting very scared of the fact that Chinese people were coming and making business, like starting businesses and making a life here. So they passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which excluded immigration of anyone who was Asian to America. And so Asians were not welcome here. And that's why they created Chinatown. They had to create Chinatown because they were not accepted anywhere else. Chinatown embodies their struggle to come here to this country and make a life when they were not welcome here, right? So Chinatown was they had to build their own community in order to survive here because they weren't welcome in other parts, and especially white parts of America. And so this was going on. I mean, this is a long history of racism and discrimination, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to then Japanese internment during the World War II. Japanese people were singled out and put into internment camps based solely on their race and not because of any evidence that they were part of the war effort. They were just American citizens, but they were locked up in internment camps. So then after Japanese internment, I mean, it went on to the Korean War, the Vietnam War. My parents were refugees from Vietnam. So America went into Vietnam and, participated in the war there, screwed up a lot of things for Vietnamese people, pulled out of the war, and then suddenly there's millions of refugees. And so my parents were part of the refugees during that time. And my mom fled to America, and she was not welcome here either. A lot of people did not want Vietnamese refugees to come to America, just like how we're seeing the Syrian migrant crisis, the refugee crisis in Syria. We're seeing a lot of people who don't want refugees now. It's the same thing as it was back in 1975 when Vietnamese refugees were coming here. So my mom was not welcome, and my family was not welcome, and we had to build an ethnic enclave for ourselves. So I grew up in like Little Saigon in California, and so all these Asian immigrants had to build their own communities in America because they were never welcome when they first initially came here. And it wasn't until years of being in this country and working and making a life here that it is now we are now more accepted, right? But are we really? Because now we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic how we are immediately, in a snap of a finger, we are suddenly now a foreign enemy again. With COVID, a lot of racism and discrimination has been happening against Asian Americans, calling us a virus, calling us a disease. Growing up, I was always told I don't belong here. I was always told that I should go back to China, even though I'm not Chinese and I was born in America. I was never born in China. But I was always told I don't belong here, that I should go back to my country. I'm like, this is my country. So, there's this very, very deep-seated racism against Asian Americans that has been long ignored, that we are always viewed as foreign, that we can never assimilate to American society, that we can never assimilate to American culture and the American people, even though we are just as American as anybody else. So that's why I love Chinatown so much here in New York, because it represents that struggle. It represents our struggle to survive and to come to a new place and find a new home for ourselves. It really symbolizes that history that we have that is so often not talked about, right? And it wasn't until this pandemic hit that people started talking more about racism against Asian Americans. So that's why I feel like my series is really important to, get people to think about these issues and this history. Like, where did Chinatown come from? Why did Chinese immigrants build this community? Why did other Asian immigrants then move to Chinatown? Because they were also not welcome when they first came here, and Chinatown was the only place that they could live in. These are things that I want people to think about when they look at Chinatown. Chinatown is not just great food. I mean, it is really good food. And it's really beautiful, and it's so much fun, and there's so much culture, but there's also like a really ugly history. That so often people that visit New York, when they go to Chinatown, they just they see it as a tourist attraction. But there's so much history, and there's so much to know about why Chinatown began in the first place, why it was created in the first place. And it was created because of racism. So that's what I want people to think about too when they look at my photos. Is
very good.
Yes, that history and that just these things that we really should know about when we want to when I'm documenting Chinatown. When I'm out there talking to people, taking pictures of people. What are their stories? Where did they come from? What's their background? That's what I really wanted to do with my series, and get people to think about history and culture and why we have these communities in the first place.
Thank you, Cindy. It's interesting to see how then there's being enclaves that are created out of necessity, struggle for protection, out of racism. They don't want to there. Then you come here, and we had this in places like in Harlem, where there were sections where all African-American people live. Same thing with Puerto Ricans. Not that I'm comparing the struggle of each group of people, but I'm just saying that it's interesting to see how people created these communities where they could feel safe, they could protect one another, where they could nurture. They were not to live elsewhere, right? So that they live in these places. You have the Puerto Ricans in East Harlem, the Lower East Side. And what is interesting is that I'm thinking we're in a unique place where, because of a pandemic, which is very real, this pandemic has amplified a lot of the problems that never were resolved: racism, xenophobia, homophobia, government neglect. Policies are not really like promote equity, right? Look what happens to museums. Many small organizations are still operating, working with artists and creating quality programming. Big museums are, but it's a different takeout here. So I'm thinking with artists moving forward. I was thinking of Ignacio's photographs. I'm imagining them being taken, now seeing New York, a New York that is being paused and is being deserted, right? I was thinking of what that may look like too also in Peru or in other parts of Latin America that, I mean, everywhere you know and you look, many places have been touched and affected by COVID. Deaths, many of them will never be recorded. We may never know the correct number because these numbers can be skewed to the benefit of people. They won't want to pat them, maybe not. But I'm thinking, you as artists, right? How do you see working on your own or in isolation or as part of a community of photographers or peers? How do you see your work moving forward? And people have asked me, what do you think your fall will look like? And I go, I don't know. I really don't know. And I'm trying to imagine scenarios. I always think I'm using the hurricane perspective to think these days because I have lived through hurricanes and I have wake up the next day and go, oh, wait, it's time to pick up the trees. So I've been on that place, and it sounds awful, but it's not, because you think, okay, we need to clear everything up and rebuild, right? So if there's a flood, you know what? There will be mold, but you rebuild. And it's hard in a country like this one where we're waking up and there's march and there's protest, and people complain, but a lot has happened, and there's been a lot of pain, and you can feel the anger. I have not been able to do much work lately because I feel that all this unrest and all this is part of a brewing, and I'm not going to say this, that, or cause it, but there is racism, but also there's been this need of people to find a place where they can find that they live in a community, they build this community, and I'm not talking about necessarily physical communities. And as artists, how do you see your work moving forward? Working in isolation, or maybe working in a community of artists that mentor what you're doing and what your social activism will take you. And social activism has many ways. I have seen what you've been posting on social media, and I've seen what other people do. Some people work directly and indirectly in many ways. Sometimes just doing your regular job will get you there, right? So how do you see your work as photographers moving forward, operating within a community of peers, alone? How do you see that moving forward?
I see my work continuing a lot, actually. I mean, I work in activism, and right now, is the time. This year, 2020, is going to be a very busy year. This last few months have allowed me to slow down and reflect a lot. And when we were all quarantined, I was able to take a break, and which I needed, because I think we all do. We all need, self-care. We all need a mental break. But this week, with all the protests happening, I've been out in the streets almost every day. And, leading up to the November election, I see a lot of work is going to need to be done. As an Asian American, I see myself as someone, my role in the movement is to document and to photograph. I have a project called Activist NYC. I've been, taking pictures of protests in New York since Occupy Wall Street. And I get people every day, messaging me, telling me, like, thank you so much for documenting the movement and showing what's happening in the streets. Because my project is very focused on portraying protesters in a positive light. My photos are showing protesters protesting peacefully, because I hate how the media focuses a lot on the violence and the rioting and the looting, and it just creates that very negative perspective of the movement. And so my work is really heavily focused on, portraying peaceful protesters. So for me, standing in solidarity with the Black community, and all Black, brown, and indigenous people in this country means just showing up and being there, sharing resources, sharing information. For me as a photographer, sharing what's happening on the streets right now so that we can look back on this historic time in our history and remember what we fought for, and remember what people did, and the suffering and the sacrifices that people made in order to achieve equality and justice in this country. So for me, I think my work is going to get even busier. I think also when you mentioned earlier about like the different communities that have created their own enclave, I think it's important to note that even if we all have our differences, we are all more similar than we are different. And the similarities that we have is that we are people of color that have been oppressed in this country, and we all have one bad boy to fight, like the villain to fight, which is white supremacy. So for me, it's really about finding ways that we can all band together in solidarity. And even with my pictures of Chinatowns, I've had Mexican people tell me like, "Oh, your photos really make me feel like a similarity to my own community, like the Mexican community, the Hispanic community, the Latino community." And I have another friend who's a photographer, a Mexican photographer, and he takes a lot of the same pictures like that I do, just like in the streets of people working and everyday life. And I think it's important to realize that we are more similar. We shouldn't be always highlighting our differences. We have so much that we can come together for, especially right now with Black people dying in the streets and with the state-sanctioned violence that is happening against innocent people in this country. There is no other option for us but to fight and to come together. And so that's why I'm out there. And that's why I stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and with the community, because for me, there is no other option. We have to stand together because we're all fighting the same thing, which is white supremacy and
absolutely. Thank you.
Power. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Adela?
So moving forward, I would love to go back to Peru and continue doing my photography, but it's really hard right now. My dad is stuck in Peru, actually. He hasn't been able to return, and he's been there since we left him there for vacation in February. And it's just really chaotic in Trujillo and in all of Peru right now. There are like people's bodies on the streets, things like that. And I don't know when I'll be able to return or when I'll be able to see my dad in person again. So it's kind of, I think, become more important to get these photos out and to sort of support like one of the good sides of Peru and Trujillo, like kind of what it was before things got crazy there and things got pretty chaotic, I would say. Like my aunt, her mom died yesterday from the coronavirus. So the situation really hits home for me. And so this art has become, sort of like a motivation for me to continue with all the photos that I've accumulated over the years, to keep editing them, to put them in the book, to spread them around. And it's become a motivational force for me to do that, meet other Peruvian photographers, connect with them, see what I can do to help with them as well. And so going forward, I would like to continue that. I've gotten a lot more photography work done now because of quarantine, and I'm happy about that. I've I was supposed to have an exhibition in Trujillo. It would have been my first Peruvian exhibition. It was supposed to happen this month, but with all of this, it's not happening, and I don't know how those organizers are doing. I haven't heard back from them, but but then this and Foco exhibition came out of nowhere. It was like a surprise for me. So this was, such a good surprise, because I feel like, Peru and other Latin American countries and those that don't have a lot of resources to fight coronavirus and other issues, I think it's a positive note in all of that. So moving forward, I want to continue with that and connect with other artists. I hope I was supposed to start as well a China master's program this year in the fall. I want to do photography there as well. But with all this, I'm not sure how that's going to go. And so, everything's up in the air. And here I am doing my photography and hoping adding some positivity to all of it. That's my story.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to hear about the passing of your grandmother. Is that correct?
My aunt's mother. And
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, my aunt is still working really hard. She's a good woman, and she comes and helps my father out every day still. Even she can't actually visit her mom because of all of the travel restrictions. You can't leave Trujillo, you can't leave the city. So yeah, it's tough.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Ignacio?
I guess for me, I've always worked in isolation for the most part, since I've never really work with other photographers. I've worked in the same space, with my documentation of the music events I go to, with the DMC DJ battle or the Tools of War Park jams. There were always other photographers there, but it wasn't we're bouncing off of each other. We might see each other's work, but it wasn't we're working collectively together for the same thing. We're actually working independently, just trying to get the best work out that we can, so it can be, showcased some way. But I don't know. It's weird because for me, like I said, I've always worked in isolation as far as working by myself, and I guess it'll be less because most of the photography that I have been doing, at least with that, has been based on what's happening. So generally the wintertime, I usually have a lot of downtime because a lot of the outdoor events would be during the warmer months. And this summer, I predict there's going to be for at least for the ones that I have been covering for the past 10 years, the two big ones are not going to happen. It might not happen till next year. I might need to try to find some other avenues, but even then, I don't want to get sick. But also too, I don't know what's going to happen, as far as what's out there, and working with groups. It would be interesting, but I guess I just haven't found, as they say, my peoples or my tribe when it comes to that. I haven't found other photographers within the same realm of what I do, or at least that are interested in sharing, collaborating in some way, and that are open to it. This closest has been with the drone photography, but even then, in the past 2 years, yes.
Sorry, with the what photographers? With the what?
Oh no, with the drone stuff I've been doing. That's also isolation work, also because it's pretty much, once you're behind, once the drone goes up, you're basically a pilot. So you can't really chit chat with other people. You're so busy concentrating on the fact, the flying conditions, trying to get, and then try to angle the drone and the camera in a way to be able to get something. So it's still isolating, it's still part of isolation work. I don't know, it's for me, it's hard to say because for some of the other people that are on this panel, I guess for me, it's even less work, I predict, till things come back to some normalcy. But that's just me. It's just because of my personality, the stuff I choose to shoot. I think that's what it forces me to be. But to find a collaborating group, that'll be At some point, maybe I'll find them. I just haven't found them yet.
One of the things that I wanted to say is that one of the things that I knew about Foco before working with them through, I had a good friend that was actually worked there many moons ago. And what I think is great is that Foco nurtures and creates a community of other photographers. And for instance, I'm a shy person. Yes, I am. And I do work alone, but also I am very grateful that I have a nice, I'm going to call it mentors and partners. And I'm not all the time working with them, but I in many ways, many of you may be working in partnership with people and you're not aware of those partnerships because they may not look that traditional to you. The partnership for this online version of the exhibition will be, and it's a Romanesque Revival Row House Gallery located in the Mud Heaven section. We partnered with them last year. And like this wonderful gallery, which is by a colleague of ours, which she hosted an exhibition on gentrification last year. The physical exhibition there had the purpose not only of bringing that artwork to that community and to that setting, but also to putting these photographers together. At the time that we worked, it was Heriberto Roman, Sophie Velez, Catherine Campbell, and we hope that by introducing you to each other's work, there's a community, and it's not that you have to be like taking photos together, but at least you will be aware of that community of photographers that are out there that you can relate to. Like, I love what Adela did, that in Peru, she had her book, ready. And she's like, well, you know what? I'm going to find out where I can present this. With Ignacio, I know that in a way you are partnering with these outdoor events and the people that you work with, and you create those partnerships. And with Cindy, through the work of activism you do, you're going to see how some of these partnerships take a more organic shape. And, it's not the traditional sense of partnership, but one of the things that I was thinking is how the work of visual artists and within that group, photographers, musicians, writers will change because of these remote and virtual presentations that we're doing of the work. Your exhibition will go online and it will be seen. And we wanted to have this conversation to make it an interactive way. But it was important for other people to see your work because you will see how it will have a lasting impression and that you will encourage and inspire other photographers like you to continue to do the work that they do. They may be documenting other enclaves of people because they feel it's important and it relates to their identity. They may want to take photos from another perspective or document buildings because of their rich history. So you are creating a community of photographers by doing the work that you do. And I also do hope that it's very unpredictable what's going to happen, but it will create a space where people will talk to one another, or at least you will be able to have a peek at what other people are doing. I think it's very inspirational for me to see the work of photographers, and I have a blessing. I get to look at things to think or maybe suggest or talk to Foco about possible shows and things that other curators can do. And it's incredible to at least be able to be on the other side. And, I'm a visual artist. I don't take photographs. If you see my photos, you probably will cringe. That's why my portfolios are so bad for our work. But what I think it's wonderful is that when I see photographers and I kind of like, I don't like to create labels for people because I don't think that's correct. But I love to see people self-identifying themselves, creating those spaces, talking about the work, and also creating a community is just interesting because community is not as the landscape that we refer with this exhibition. Is something more organic, that it's there, that you naturally are doing. And what it's going to be wonderful is that now you're on a sort of Rolodex, in my mind, of artists that I have had the pleasure to work with and that I will know your work and then I'll be sharing with other people. And what is great is that now you're part of the family of Foco and your work will be part of that other work that gets to be seen and that photography that I think it's very inspiring, especially now. It's important that people of color have these spaces and a space for advocacy, a place where you can show your work and that continue to value and present quality work to our communities. So I think this meant to be a reception that we wanted to have with you, and we weren't able to do that. But we're very happy to have you. So it's been an honor for me to get to know you and to follow your work.
Thank you so much again. Yeah, thank you. It was good dialogue.
Thank you, Adela. Thank you, Anders. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Ignacio. Thank you, Bill. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.